Well, everybody knows by now that, obviously in week 9, it's going to be an injury factory, and it's also going to be a factory of bye weeks. And so you kind of have to just grasp onto the positives while you can get them right. And I think that one of the positives that I'm choosing to grasp on for myself in one of my own fantasy leagues is that Puka Nacua should be coming back this week. I mean, he was limited in practice today. All the reports would indicate that he is going to come back this week. So I do have that to hang my hat on this week, and I choose to because I've got him in a very important dynasty league, and I've got him in several best ball leagues as well. So I'm definitely very hopeful that Puka Nacua comes back, but obviously there's bad news too. I mean, you've got somebody like Terry McLaurin who just came back, and now he's out. So, I mean, he re-aggravated that injury. I do remember saying this at the time of the injury. I did worry that could be a long season problem, and it was the same injury. And now there's just something different about when you re-injure something that already happened. And I don't know how else to say it other than the fact that I'm really, really worried about him this particular season. I mean, I don't know if he comes back, he'll be fully healthy and we can fully trust him. So definitely very worried about guys like Terry McLaurin, but again, you kind of got to take the positives where you can get them. So I'm going to live with the Puka Nacua positive for now. And of course, we're going to get into some questions tonight for Week 9 fantasy football. So put your questions in there. Really quick, just to update you guys and to remind you guys that if you play other fantasy sports, we support all sports on FS Roundup. So if you want to utilize, and I would actually argue that if you're in fantasy basketball or fantasy hockey, the waiver wire is much more tedious and important because it's a daily thing. Well, that's where our tool comes into play. Automate that process and make you not have to get up at 3 a.m. to get those free agents after priority ads run. So if you have multiple leagues, man, and you're in fantasy basketball, fantasy hockey as well, sign up for FS Roundup, get that automatic waiver wire tool, get access to my top 250 rankings, and also go post a start-sit poll, and that's for free. You can post a start-sit poll for free, and you can also vote on other polls for free as well. So, yeah, I appreciate everyone being in here tonight. Let's get into some questions right now. So K-Sum10, what's going on? The X Factor Tube. Should I trade Jaylen Warren for Travis Etienne? So I was discussing, I've actually been talking about a Travis Etienne-centric trade for a while now. And, I have a problem with him. And a lot of it is just based on, if you actually look at Etienne, and I missaid this on today's rankings. If you actually look at Etienne, he's actually been mostly productive. Right? Like, he's been rushing for about 5 yards per carry on the entirety of the season. So, it's not that I don't think he's a good player. I've always liked Travis Etienne, the talent. But the problem I have with him is that this current coaching staff and the entire administration from top to bottom, they did not draft him. Now, I think that could be not as big of a deal for some as it is for others. So, for example, like myself, I would look at this scenario with Brian Thomas Jr. being floated in the trade market and on the trading block, and I would say that kind of shows you that they don't care about, like, no coach or no GM doesn't care about a previous draft pick for someone. Like, it doesn't matter. So that's been my problem with Etienne, is that if you look at the RB usage pie charts on FS Roundup, which these are like extremely valuable and extremely free because they are free. Like, Etienne is not the only guy in there. They have a mixture of Bashal Tootin and LaQuint Allen. So, like, I just kind of can see more than Warren how he gets less work over time. Now, the one thing I will say is, like, you shouldn't trade Warren. You shouldn't trade this one straight up. Like, if you had Etienne, and I know you're asking me if you would trade Warren for Etienne, the way I would still handle this is, like, I would still take Etienne for the long haul. But the way I would say I would do this one is, I think it should be like a package type deal. Like, obviously, you're going to get the perceived upgrade from Travis Etienne, but I would try to sell off, like, Chris Olave and maybe see if I can get somebody like Nico Collins, for example. Like, that's probably something that I would do personally. I don't hate it, like doing the bet, the straight up trade, but it's probably not my move personally. Rogo Ho Photos. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Sup, bro? Practically cooked at 2-6, wasted with number 3 on McCarthy. 12-man half PPR. Jaden Daniels, McConkey, Jacoby Myers, Gibbs, Marks, Kittle, Odunze, Cardi, and Denver's defense. And the bench is Swift, Pacheco, Shaheed, Dobbs, Fannin, and Tampa Bay. I think that's what it means. What do I do? Everyone has a Q tag. Was thinking of waiting for O tag to pick up a streaming defense, or should I get someone else? The defense this week, I don't mind it. Like, I think that, at this point in the year, there's a couple defenses that I feel pretty confident in saying that in most situations, 90% of matchups, I'm fine starting. And I would say Denver's one of them. I would say Denver and the Seattle Seahawks are the other. Those are two defenses I'm just pretty fine with playing as is. Unless they're playing teams like the Chiefs or even the Chargers or the Bills or the Lions. Like, in most situations, I think those are fine defenses to play. And the Broncos this week, they're playing the Texans, who I do still think, even though they are favored right now by Vegas, I do still think that it's impossible for Houston's offensive line to be able to hold up against the Broncos pass rush. Whereas, you look at the 49ers pass rush last week, they couldn't generate any pressure on CJ Stroud. And that's a different story this week. So I don't think the defense is your problem and why you're 2-6. Obviously, getting McCarthy was not an ideal move, but that didn't kill you either. Realistically, you just have, your wide receiver 3 rather is not fantastic with Jacoby Myers. Kittle obviously missed a lot of time. I personally would play Swift over Pacheco. I'm assuming that we're talking about this week, so I'll kind of answer it in two parts. What the change I would make to your lineup this week is obviously if Jaden Daniels plays, he's in. It's hard to tell right now, but I would play him if he's in. I'd play Ladd for sure. I'd play Gibbs for sure. I would personally play DeAndre Swift over Woody Marks. I would personally play Rashid Shaheed over Jacoby Myers. I would personally play. Yeah, I think that's good. And I would also make the switch off of Cardi as the kicker. I don't think that he's much good. I really, realistically, the Rams, if you kind of look at them on the season, they're more efficient in the red zone. And that's my problem is that, I always discuss this with kickers. When you have a kicker in fantasy football, ideally you want to get a kicker who is on a middle tier offense that doesn't always convert at the goal line. That's kind of been Brandon Aubrey's problem a lot this year is that he's on an offense that's actually really good. And I kind of thought that they'd be more mid-tier, but Aubrey has such a strong leg that he can kick 60-yarders when they feel like they're out of range. I obviously Brandon or Aubrey's not available. Boswell's probably not available, but you can go to my kicker rankings video and you can see a bunch of kickers I would play. I think Riley Patterson this week in the Miami Dolphins is a better play than Cardi. I think that Baltimore's kicker, Tyler Loop, is a better play than Josh Cardi. I think there's a lot of guys, man. Andy Beregulis of the New England Patriots. So I would go kicker fishing for sure because I don't think that that's going to help you there. And I think a lot of it is what it comes down to. Unless you're getting blown out, a lot of what it comes down to is, winning those positions. Something I've always noticed, when I started doing defense and kicker rankings several years ago, I was people need to do this. This needs to be a thing in the fantasy community because you can look at any matchup, and if there's a massive swing between two positions, kickers and defense, that decides a game. Last week, I discussed on what I got right and wrong this past Monday night, how this past week was the first week that I can remember of playing fantasy football where every freaking one of my teams lost. Every one of them, they lost. And if you looked at my matchup over those, all throughout all those games, one common thread was that I had the 49ers defense who got negative points, and I had a lot of Eddie Pinheiro, their same kicker. Well, that was like negative 2 points, I think, combined between the two. And you look across the opponents, and they had like 20 points combined between their kicker and their defense. I mean, the swing on that alone is 20 plus points. It's massive. So I think that doing that with your kicker is a big move for sure. I'd stick with Denver's defense, but, realistically, I think your team moving forward isn't terrible. Obviously, getting Kittle back is going to help you. And I don't think that your starting lineup, as long as Jaden can get back healthy, is really that bad. And you've also got some depth. Like, Dobbs is not a bad play. Fannon's not a bad play. Swift, like I said, I would play him over Woody Marks. Like, there's a lot of guys that I think you have that are fine plays. So, yeah, I don't I don't think that you're in bad position at all. I mean, you could look at some trades as far as, like, upgrading. Particularly, I would say your running back position probably needs an upgraded RB2. I don't have a problem with taking, like, Woody Marks and packaging them together with, like, Romeo Dobbs or Rashid Shaheed and trying to get, a different upgrade as far as, like, a running back 2/3, like maybe Kenneth Walker or someone like that. But realistically, I think 2-6, I know it's tough. That's not a fun hole to climb out of, but I've seen teams do it. And actually, I did it myself years ago in a Dynasty League. So, appreciate the super chat. Buzz Ellis, what's going on? Man, my throat's clogged up tonight. Appreciate the super chat. Trade Brees for Flowers. Roster is Allen, CMC, Jonathan Taylor, Brees, Nico, Troy Franklin, Terry McLaurin, Kincaid. Bench literally nothing. 6-10 bonus wins, or trade Brees for Gadsden and Benson. So let's answer the first part, which is trade Brees for Flowers. I actually think that Brees is a really good sell high candidate right now. I do think that, look, my problem with Brees is the same problem I have with Chase Brown, right? Like, in the days that go by, it becomes less and less likely that Brees is going to get traded. And that's been the problem with Brees, is that, like, if he stays on this team, then there's nothing for him. Like, there's nothing for him moving forward outside of, like, 2 more games maybe of getting that type of production. And I would venture to bet that the peak game was this past week. Like, you're not going to get another performance like you just got from Breece Hall again. I mean, Breece Hall, what he just did this past week was absolutely fantastic, and I just wouldn't rely on that again. So, I think that someone like Breece Hall is definitely a factor as far as, like, trade, sell high targets. I'm okay with Zay. Like, I think that Zay is a guy that I've always thought is underrated this year. And I do think that we're going to see a better version of Zay moving forward. But I'd probably try to get a little bit more if I could. Like, I feel like this is an upgrade where you can make, your wide receivers are obviously in some trouble. I mean, you clearly have, your running backs are clearly not the problem, right? Like, you've got 2 top-tier options with CMC and Jonathan Taylor. And then you've got Nico, a failing wide receiver 1, Troy Franklin, who's becoming a wide receiver 2, and then Terry McLaurin, who's been out. So you have, like, you're in good position as far as your running backs go, but your wide receiver is your weakness. I think that I'd probably try to see if I could swing a higher end piece. Try to swing if you can get, like, a Cortland Sutton off a bad week, or a Michael Pittman possibly. That's, like, the direction I would probably try to go to before I just sold him outright for Zay. But I really do think that Zay is a good trade target to fall back on if you can't get those other options. Like, I'm okay with doing it entirely, but I would try to get the other options first. Trade Brees for Gadsden and Benson. Yeah, I it comes down to, with Gadsden, like, here's my problem ultimately with trading for tight ends is that, I traded earlier in the year in one of my personal leagues. I traded away Darren Waller and Marvin Harrison Jr. for Ladd McConkey. And at the time, I had some people like in the league that were like, that seems kind of dumb for you to do that. And my whole rationale for doing it was like, Ladd's a buy low right now. Marvin, I can't trust. And I don't feel like I will be able to trust him moving forward. I think with Ladd, everything my metrics are showing me that I've talked about on FS Roundup a lot, bottom line metrics would say that this guy is a wide receiver one for the team still. And Waller, I viewed him as a throw-in piece, even though he was doing well at the time, because I saw him as a guy that was he would not shake the injury bug all year. Now, obviously, Gadsden is younger than Waller, and I do think that the breakout is real to a point. But my problem with trading for tight ends is that unless someone has like significant draft capital attached to them, and I'm talking about NFL draft capital, I'm not just talking about fantasy draft capital, I'm talking about real NFL draft capital. It's hard for me to like fully buy into this guy because of the past 2 weeks that we've seen from him. Realistically, it's been like 3 weeks, but I would probably prefer to get Flowers because like your tight end situation with Kincaid, I honestly don't worry about it as much as I worry about your wide receiver position. Like, I get it, Kincaid just had a bad day, but Kincaid is a guy I do think moving forward, like as he continues to work his way back from the injury, is going to be a good player again for fantasy. And again, you don't need running backs. Like, you're comfortable with your two running backs. You obviously doesn't seem like you have no depth. You said bench is literally nothing. So you have no depth behind Jonathan Taylor and CMC. But, when you're in that kind of league, you just have to play for the upside, right? Well, your upside on a weekly basis, especially without Terry McLaurin, it's completely capped because you don't have another option that you can flex. So Zay, to me, is the better trade to make if you're going to trade away Brees. That's the one that I would personally do. And I like Benson. I like him a lot, but I do personally prefer Zay Flowers. Because the problem is with Benson, man, we just don't know at this point, like, whether or not he's going to come back. That's just the unfortunate reality is that I love Trey Benson more than most people do, and I don't think that it's any guarantee that he gets back to what I thought was going to happen, which was a breakout year for him. Appreciate the super chat, man. George Brennan, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Appreciate the super chat. Just traded Gadsden Etienne, latest first round for Achan and Dynasty. How are you feeling about it? I always love Dynasty questions because, obviously, like, this isn't a Dynasty channel, but I play Dynasty. I've played it for years, and it just adds a different element because, I was thinking about this today just to like put things in perspective of Dynasty versus redraft. For anybody who doesn't play Dynasty Fantasy Football, number one, I would recommend it if you have like a tight group because part of the fun of Dynasty is a move I had to make today. And realistically, I had to make the move yesterday because I was thinking to myself of waiver wire moves. And so one of the guys that I was like, I wanted to pick up, no, it wasn't that I wanted to pick up anybody. I had to move someone. I had to drop someone because I had Puka Nacua coming back from the IR. So I had to make room for him and drop a player. And the two players that I had to basically debate in my head whether to drop was Christian Watson and Darius Slayton. And so in a redraft league, I may have been able to convince myself to drop Christian Watson because I think that Darius Slayton will be a very important piece moving forward and someone who may command more of a target share on a consistent basis than Watson does. So I may have been able to convince myself I'm going to drop Watson in a redraft league over Darius Slayton. But in a dynasty league, it was different. I ended up dropping Slayton without really thinking twice about it because Watson is a guy that I had Jordan Love on the same dynasty team. And Watson's younger, and the team has committed to him with money this offseason. Now, the Giants did the same, but he's not the same type of player that Watson is. He's not as explosive of an athlete. He's also not as young. So, dynasty, just for those who don't play it, you have to think about more long-term moves that you would make than playing a redraft league. And I love redraft. I have several redraft leagues, but I love dynasty for sure. So, I always love getting one of these trades. And I think that when you think about like Gadsden, right? Gadsden on one hand can be viewed as like a huge come-up player, and he was a massive pickup for most people in the dynasty community a couple weeks ago. Before he really broke out, like people were spotting that and sniffing it out and saying this guy is really talented. And so Gadsden, his value in dynasty alone is probably risen up to like a third-round pick. And that's the way I think of it. And ETN, I think that selling off ETN is the best move that you could probably make. Now, it depends on like what your latest first you say. Like, it depends on how late that first is. Because if you're in a 10-man league, for example, and that first is the 10th overall pick or the 9th, I would say that that's a really solid move. I mean, you're getting Devon Achane, who's a player that's still young in his prime, will be for a couple more years, and clearly he can dominate from any type of game script because he will be able to catch passes. So he's a guy that's game script proof. And so I do think that, Achane is definitely worth all of that if it's a late first, but I mean, if you're talking about a 105, that's a little bit of a tougher pill to swallow because of the fact that I don't mind giving up ETN. If Gadsden turns into something, though, it'll feel a little bit bad if you gave up Gadsden and then all those other pieces with like a mid-first, like the 105 or the 104, for example. That's a little bit of a tougher pill to swallow when you probably could have drafted a good running back. So I do think that overall, like if it truly is like a late first, or if you're in like a 12-man league and it's like a 10 or 11 or 12 pick, then that's a great move. But if you're talking about your latest first is like the 105, I'd feel a little bit worse about that because of the fact that I think Gadsden and the 105 could have got the job done probably. But, I mean, Achane, getting him in Dynasty, you've got to feel good about it for the time being, for sure. Appreciate the super chat, man. Good to see you in here. Jared, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Yo, hope you're good. You as well. Doing pretty good tonight. Hey, we just hit 25,000 subscribers over here. Feel pretty good today. I went out to have a couple chispas, which are basically margaritas, a couple hours ago. So I'm feeling pretty good, but I appreciate you guys because this channel is nothing without y'all. So I hope you're doing good as well. Start one running back, one flex, full PPR. Tracy Jr., Bam Knight, JCM, Jacoby Myers, Wandale, and Josh Downs. So let's look at the running back position. Tracy, Bam Knight, and Bill. So I can go ahead and rule out Bill. If you didn't watch my running back rankings earlier today, I would suggest to go watch that. I think of Bill as the type of guy that he is so gross to play right now. Like, we went the Bill roller coaster has been so wild this offseason, or not this offseason, but like dating back to the offseason, it's been so wild. I mean, Bill went from unknown to rocket ship even more to not a good player to good again and then back down to bad. So like I said it last week, and I have a little more clarity as far as ranking him this week goes, but I still do feel like he's a hard player to rank because we haven't seen that many games of him with Jaden Daniels, and that makes a difference for a running back. Like, when you have a running quarterback at quarterback, it makes a big difference as far as what you can do personally and the fantasy output that you can provide. So I do think that Bill, like with Jaden Daniels, could be a really good play still. And I don't want to let it go. but I also would say, like, if you just factor in the matchup this week, it's versus Seattle. This is not a player that I really want to particularly play. So I would definitely go ahead and sit him. I'd play Bam and Tracy over him. So it really comes down to Tracy and Bam. And the way I look at this is that if you think about like what we've been given from Bam Knight, it's actually been okay. But the problem that I'm having with him is that, Kyler Murray is I'm guilty of this too. Like, I always call Kyler like a really talented player, and he's been a really talented player for a long time in this league. And all the while, like the 2 games that Bam has played without Kyler Murray, he's actually done pretty well, all things considered. And the Cardinals' offense as a whole has had a pretty high ceiling. So I just feel like if all things are considered, I'm not sure that we can realistically say that Bam is better off with Kyler than he is with Jacoby Brissett. And you have to kind of assume that Kyler's coming back. I mean, let's double check the Kyler Murray situation. I kind of assume that he's coming back this week. Kyler. Yeah, I mean, he's expected to play. I would imagine that Kyler plays. So, yeah, if Kyler plays, like, that throws a monkey wrench into it a little bit for me with Bam. Whereas with, like, Tracy, we kind of know what to expect, right? Like, Tracy is playing against a defense that's been obliterated by injuries. And we do know that they can push the ball down the field as well. And their quarterback is the same. So when it comes down to, like, for example, like Bam Knight and Tracy, they're really close to my rankings this week. So when it comes down to those, like, really close decisions, I have to split hairs. And so those are the types of decisions that are ultimately going to decide for me what way I'm leaning. So for this week, I'm leaning towards Tracy. So I would personally play Tracy at running back. And then the flex position, do I go Bam Knight, Jacoby Myers, Wandale, or Josh Downs? Because we already ruled out Bill. I'd play Bam over Jacoby Myers because he's just a guy that I don't like unhappy players. I mean, we've seen the same thing with A.J. Brown this year, a much higher draft pick in fantasy drafts. Like, guy clearly is not happy in Philadelphia, and I think his play is clearly being affected by that. Wandale Robinson comes down to which Giant do I want. I think with the return of Slayton, it makes things a little bit questionable at best for Wandale, because if you look at the work last week, the one thing I didn't mention on today's wide receiver rankings video is that if you watch the game on Sunday versus the Eagles, Darius Slayton had a massive play that went for a touchdown. They got called back from an offensive pass interference. So, like, he realistically was the top target in this offense. It wasn't Wandale. So I will say I'm a little worried about Wandale personally. I would personally go with Bam Knight over Wandale Robinson. And then Josh Downs. I would still go with Bam Knight over Downs because of the fact that his target share is getting better, I would say, on a weekly basis. Like, he's gone from, like, an unstable 2 targets per game to, like, close to 5 targets per game. Like, this past week he got 3, but he just got in the end zone. But that's kind of my point, is that this is still a low floor for a guy that I do think is a better player than what he's being targeted. But realistically, they've got Tyler Warren along with Michael Pittman, so that's always going to be a problem for Josh Downs. So I do think that I think that Bam Knight and Tracy are my 2 plays here. Appreciate the super chat, man. Good to see you in here, Jer. Kaiser, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. What's up, GOAT? Oh, so nice of you. Question in the chat. 4-4, 10-man, full PPR. Just traded Dowdle and Shakir for ETN. I now have Mahomes, Tracy, Javonte, Judkins, ETN, Sutton, T. Higgins, Ricky, BTJ, CD, Pickens, and Isaiah Davis. What trades should I try doing? So you just traded Dowdle and Shakir for ETN. I'll be honest, I don't love that trade. Like, I got to be honest here. Like, I think that I kind of just went through this with ETN. You know, I think that personally, what it comes down to with ETN, and my problem with him is, again, what I highlighted earlier, is that they didn't draft him. You know, and he could easily just lose volume and become less relevant in this offense if they choose to go with their own guys. I mean, Bashal Tune's their own guy. LaQuint Allen is their own guy. Like, they've liked to play those guys over the year. So, and Rico's about to take the backfield. So, I'll be honest. Like, I'm not trying to, like, put this trade down because you've already made it. You know, like, I'm just trying to be honest with you. Like, I don't like to BS anybody. I'm just a direct guy. And especially when you're paying me for a question, like, I feel like I have to be honest with you because I don't want you to, you know, make a mistake. It could turn out in your favor. I just don't I personally would not have made that trade. So now your running back room looks like Tracy, Javonte Judkins, and ETN. And we don't know the status of Quinshon Judkins. I think I saw it. Did I see that he's day-to-day? And obviously they're going into the bye week, so it doesn't matter for this week. But I feel like I saw that he's day-to-day. Yeah, day-to-day with the shoulder injury. So, you know, being on the bye week, he shouldn't be that affected. So you've got realistically like a good 1-2 combo at the running back position, and ETN's a solid flex option. And I also will say this, that I do think that Tracy moving forward is going to be a solid RB2. And so your running back position is not bad. Like, you've got a good running back position. Having Mahomes is elite. You've got Sutton, T. Higgins, Ricky, BTJ, CD, and Pickens. You've got a really good wide receiver room as well. And you've got Isaiah Davis. You know, I think that your running back position is good. I do feel like it could possibly use an upgrade, though. Because your wide receiver position, I think, is pretty nice. Like, you've got, at worst, CeeDee Lamb and Pickens, which on the same team is not usually ideal, but I do think the Cowboys are kind of in a unique position this year to where it doesn't really matter. But I do also think that Sutton as your wide receiver 3 is pretty great, and then Brian Thomas Jr. as your wide receiver 4 is excellent. So I don't think that your wide receiver room needs much work. I think if anything, I would probably try to look to upgrade the running back position. And I don't, like, the way I'll say it is I don't think that this team needs a ton of a movement. But if I was to make a move, it would be to get a better running back. And I would probably try to grab somebody like, I'd probably try to grab like either Sutton or T. Higgins, depending on what we want to do, and take ETN, because again, I'm not a big ETN guy. Like, I think that ETN is kind of what we saw from him in 2023 when I called him a league winner back then, was like a guy who started out and burned so bright and then just really petered off at the end of the year. So I do think that I would probably try to get ETN, package him with T, and see if I could upgrade to like an Ashton Genty type. Or see if I could upgrade to, and I get it, like Ashton Genty may not feel like upward movement, but I feel like with Ashton Genty, I have less concerns about him really going downhill. So, so I would try to get that. Or if you really wanted to upgrade, you could get Sutton and ETN and really try to go for big air and try to get somebody like Saquon Barkley, which probably isn't going to happen at this point. But, you know, someone like that might be viable, because Saquon, as good as he was last week, is still averaging 3 points per game less than like the RB8 in fantasy. So, Still like a high-end RB1 situation. But the point being is I don't really think that you need immediate moves. Like, I do think you've got a good roster here. And I think that a lot of trades at this point for you would probably be ill-advised because you might end up just going backwards. Because, again, your wide receiver position doesn't need anything. Your quarterback is set. And you've also got, I don't know who your tight end is, but, I mean, you've got good enough running backs to get it through. So I do think that your team is pretty much set. I don't think you need to make trades, but there is trades that you could try, and you could try the ones that I suggested. Appreciate the super chat. Alexis Bolanos, appreciate the super chat. Start 3, sit 3. Ramondre, K9, Brashard Smith, Tyler Warren, Myers, and Slayton. No matter what, Tyler Warren's going to my lineup this week. Already the guy's a stud. And number 2, he's playing the Steelers defense, which is soft and disgraceful and just all around terrible. And especially their pass defense. So Warren is going to my lineup no matter what. I think that a guy like Ramondre Stevenson, again, is very risky this week. Like, I really do. Atlanta is so hot and cold, and I don't know what to do with them. Like, they're the only team in the NFL I don't feel like I have a good beat on right now. Because, like, for example, I think the Texans are probably in there as well. But, like, a team like the Giants, for example, right? Like, I feel like we kind of know what they are. They're going to go back down to a team that is flawed and will pull out a couple games out of their hat, and they'll be aggressive still because Daboll's fighting for his job and they've got a good young quarterback. But overall, just not enough talent on that roster to really pull out wins. I say that because I think the Falcons are a team that I genuinely look at, and I don't know what to do with them yet. We've seen some really good performances. I mean, them winning against the Bills was awesome. I mean, and I know that the Vikings aren't great, but them winning against the Vikings on Sunday night too was pretty awesome as well. But then they come out and they give you a game like they did against the Panthers or the Dolphins last week, and they look dysfunctional, incompetent. So, like, Ramondre is really tricky to me because their run game already is not good. They already don't give him the full workload, and I'm not convinced that they're going to win outright. Like, I could see the Falcons giving them trouble because they've given good teams trouble this year. So, I don't like Ramondre. I'd play Kenneth over Ramondre. I'd play Brashard Smith over Ramondre. I'd play Ramondre over Myers, and I would play Slayton over Ramondre personally. But I would play Brashard Smith this week. Like, I'm actually planning on playing Brashard Smith in a dynasty league. I am, because I believe that what we're going to see, Isaiah Pacheco has already been, did he get ruled out, or did I just see that he's likely going to be out? Let's see. I think I saw that he got ruled out. Isaiah Pacheco. Expected to miss. So, yeah, he's not going to play. Bottom line is Pacheco is not going to play in this matchup. So that means that, they've got Kareem Hunt, and I believe Kareem Hunt will be involved, but I don't know if he's going to be involved to the point where he's going to be super important to this team. I mean, I do think Brashard Smith is going to get a bunch of work, and it's a high-flying matchup against the Bills. I like Brashard Smith. I'm taking the training wheels off, and I'm taking the life jacket off, and I'm jumping into the water. So I'd go Brashard Smith as one of them too. And then it comes down to Kenneth. It comes down to Slayton. Because I'll go ahead and bench Myers. I'll play Slayton over Myers. I think the one thing that keeps me on the hamster wheel with Kenneth is, again, he is a guy that he's really good. And I will stand by this with Kenneth. I do believe that he is a really good player. And I do think that at some point we could see him break off a big run and get good fantasy upside. Because with Charbonnet, Charbonnet is definitely a thorn in his side as far as getting goal line work and short yardage. but he's not taking like these big, massive runs like Kenneth can, because that's not who he is. So I do still personally think that Kenneth Walker's a solid play. They're playing the Commanders this week. It's not a matchup I worry about too much. And at the same time, I look at the matchup versus the 49ers, and I think it's good for Slayton, but I also don't think that he's good enough for me to justify playing over a better player. So I'll go Kenneth, I'll go Brashard Smith, and I'll go Tyler Warren. Appreciate the super chat, man. Always good to see you in here, Alexis Bolanos. Really quick before I answer this next question. If you don't get your question answered tonight, I'm going to try to work through as many as I can, obviously. But make sure to start a start-sit poll on FS Roundup for free. You can start a poll for free, vote on other polls for free as well. And if you want access to my top 250 rankings, access to the automatic waiver wire tool, and other features like the comparison feature, that is the premium subscription, which is $6 a month now. Chief Perp, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. I like that name. Trade Gadsden and Dowdle for Adams. So I was just kind of telling someone else that had a question about trading Dowdle that I don't love the prospect of trading him because, I think that I think my problem, and this goes back to Bill, right? So Bill, I think Bill's a really good example because Bill now is a guy that you probably, and I would back this up, like I wish I sold Bill when his value was at an all-time high. Like at the beginning of the year, and especially after Eckler went down, his value was so high, I wish I had just sold him. But my whole point before I sold him, before, other people, advising other people to do that, was I don't know what the guy is. And I want to see it play out with the guy on my team because we could have a league winner here. And we don't want to give that guy away for something that we think is valuable right now, but ultimately doesn't turn out to be. So Rico kind of right now is falling into that category for me because Rico is now being named basically the de facto starter by the head coach, who is an offense-first guy. And he loved Chuba Hubbard. But he said this week, I can't ignore Rico any longer. This guy is a better back, and he's done really well for us, and he's run the ball really physically, which is what we want. So Rico, to me, is now kind of, for me personally, getting the Bill treatment of how Bill was treated by me the first month of the season, which was, I don't want to sell him. I don't want to sell Bill because I don't know what he is yet. Now, again, it would have worked out better for you, but my philosophy is like I don't want to trade a guy before I know what he is. Because there's a lot of examples over the years of people who traded guys early. Puka Nacua was a waiver wire pickup years ago, and people traded him, and they felt dumb because he was a league winner. Kyron Williams, same thing. So, like, these guys do crop up, and they become league winners, and if you sell them too early, it's a bad move. Now, I will say this. I think that getting Davante Adams does feel like an enticing piece to get because Davante is, I don't think, a league-winning type of player, but I do think of him as a guy that is a very consistent staple in your lineup. And I don't know what your tight end situation is, but like Gadsden right now, if you're tight endless, can run the table. I mean, he can realistically be your tight end for the future, and especially for the time being. Like, he could just be plugged and played right now. But if you've got Kittle, if you've got Bowers, if you've got Kincaid, if you've got Tucker Kraft, Tyler Warren, I don't care who you got. There are guys that obviously I would sell the guy if I had those other guys. But if you're tight endless, I would not advise you to do this trade because, again, we don't know what Gadsden is either. So you've got two guys here that we don't know who they are, and you're going to trade them for someone we do know who they are, and it's not a league winner. So I would be a little cautious of doing this if you don't have a tight end, particularly, and if your running back room is shaky. If you have Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey, I would do this trade. But if you have Kyron Williams and Breece Hall, then I would not do this trade because I think that this guy could be a league winner for your team. So it depends on situation. I think that if you had, again, a shaky running back room or a shaky tight end room, I would not do this. But if you were set at both, then I would do this trade. Appreciate the super chat. JV, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat, and good to see you in here as well. PPR play 2. Kupp, Watson, Gordon, Travion, Henderson. Well, I'm going to play Watson over Kupp. I think my crusade of dissing Kupp continues because I just don't view him as a valuable guy in fantasy. I just think that what we've seen so far is just a product of when Darnold's having a ridiculous game. Because a lot of games, like again, the Texans game, they put up 27. He had 1 target and 1 catch for 32 yards. Like, there's just a lot of games where you're not going to get much out of Kupp. And on the other hand, like Watson is going to be a consistent big play threat for the Packers. So I'll go ahead and play Watson over him for sure. And it comes down to Watson versus Gordon or Travion Henderson. For me personally, Watson's going in. No question about it. Ollie Gordon is not that highly ranked for me this week. I think the problem I'm having with Gordon this week is that, Ollie Gordon, for the majority of the year, like his touches have been really limited. It has not become a split backfield in Miami. And if you look at last week, it was a little bit of a mirage. Like 10 carries for this guy. Well, if you think about the majority of that game, they were crushing the Falcons. Like they were not ever in a position where you felt like this game was in jeopardy. So they could realistically do that, especially towards the end of the game. But if you put them up against the Ravens on Thursday night, like that's not going to be a blowout. If anything, they're the ones who are going to get blown out tomorrow. So they're not going to blow out the Ravens. And that, therefore, like in any other matchup, I mean, just look at week 7. I mean, they got blown out by the Browns, and Ollie Gordon had 5 carries for 11 yards. Look at week 6. They played the Chargers. That was a close game, and Ollie Gordon had 2 carries. So, like, I think Ollie Gordon has very specific game scripts that he can fit into, and that's only if they're blowing a team out. Well, think of how rare that is for the Dolphins to do. So, to me, Gordon's going on the bench, regardless. Like, he's the last option of any of these guys. Travion versus Kupp is a closer one. I think that what I ultimately lean with and why I would go with Travion is because of the fact that, again, I think there's a good, like, we don't know for sure. I can't positively affirm this because the Falcons have shown me a lot of different sides to them. But I do think there's reason to believe that the Patriots could crush them because the Patriots, unlike the Falcons, are very consistent. And they've been handling teams over the last month. Handling them. And their offense is so hot right now. And Travion, he got the most amount of work he did in any week against the Browns. And that's a strong run defense that he ran for 7.5 a carry on. So against the Falcons defense, I could see him doing better. He did fumble, so that is one thing to keep in mind. But I think for me still, again, like with Kupp, it's not going to be one of those games where they're going to have to throw a bunch and Darnold's going to go crazy and Kupp's going to get a bunch of work. So I do think I'd go Henderson and I would go with Watson. Appreciate the super chat, man. Good to see you in here. Adrian, what's going on, my man? Good to see you in here. Appreciate the super chat. I am now 7-1, so hopefully now they would trade me. I hope so too. I have a gut feeling that the Ravens defense will come back since Lamar's back. Gut feeling. Yeah, I actually don't think this feeling is unfounded. And this goes back to me calling Derrick Henry a buy low. A lot of calling Henry a buy low was me projecting that based on schedule and based on Lamar's return, they're going to be in more positive game scripts to where they can bleed the clock with a lead, and Henry comes out and shows you why he's a great fantasy asset. So I could understand the same being the case for the Ravens defense. The one thing I'll caution on is that the Ravens defense, let's just take last week, for example, right? So they beat I would venture to say that they crushed the Bears. Like, the game was not nearly as close as it appeared. And they realistically controlled that game for the most of it. And even then, like, their defense was not good in fantasy. And there's a couple reasons why. Number one, they're not taking the ball away. And they're not getting after the quarterback. Well, there's two reasons for that. Number one, their secondary's banged up. And number two, their front seven's banged up. Even worse than the secondary. So I would caution you on going gung-ho, especially on a Thursday night game. I do think that the Dolphins matchup, it's at home for the Dolphins. I think they could put up points in this one. And being that it's a Thursday night game, I lowered defenses anyways in my rankings. So the Ravens, they're not that far out. Like, Adrian, I know you have access. I know you're a premium subscriber here. So, you have access to see where the defense is ranked for the Ravens on my rankings. They're not that low. Like, they're a decent spot because I do see your point, but I'm cautious about them because they were so bad the first month and a half of this season that I can't get that out of my brain. So I understand your point, but I'm a little cautious. Appreciate the super chat. Alec Jorge, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. 12-team PPR 6-2. Offered 2 trades. One is Roman Hampton for my Sutton, Chase Brown. 2 is Egbuka for Chase Brown. Team is Dak, HN, Chase Brown, Rico, K9, Tet, Sutton, Warren, and Fannin. So let's go through trade 1. So you would get Rome and Hampton for Sutton and Chase Brown. So I will say, this actually on the surface does not bother me. And the reason is because you're basically going to get an injured player with upside and send away the running back that I think definitely peaked in week 8. And especially when you hear the news that Joe Flacco may not play. I mean, that guy, their season hinges on him. Like, their fantasy season. Obviously, we know the Bengals aren't going anywhere as far as playoff contention, but the Bengals' fantasy players and their fantasy options completely hinge on Joe Flacco. So I do think that Chase Brown has peaked, and we cannot start him and feel good about it. So I realistically don't have a problem with selling off a guy like Chase Brown and getting Hampton, because I will say the one thing about Hampton, I don't think he's coming back soon. I mean, I have Amari and Hampton. So I've looked into this a little bit, and, he was still in a walking boot after the Week 8 win, right? So they were there on Thursday night. They showed him, I think, briefly up in the box on the broadcast, and he was still in a walking boot, had his foot propped up. And I did some research on that. And I've seen orthopedic surgeons who said if it was a high ankle sprain, he wouldn't still be in a walking boot 4 weeks later. And I remember it took me back to the moment that he first got injured. And they didn't even run tests on the guy. They put him on IR faster than you could blink. Within 24 hours, they put the guy on IR before they ran any tests. Now, what they called it was a high ankle sprain, right? Well, typically, you run MRIs to see if there was a tear in a ligament or something like that. On the other hand, this is me just speculating, right? But in locker rooms, they teams have x-ray machines, right? And what I'm trying to get at here is that I think personally that he had a fracture in his ankle. I personally think that. And that it's just not being discussed. Because here's the reality, guys. A lot of teams conceal injury news. This is not a new thing. I know the Ravens just got fined for screwing around with the Lamar Jackson situation this past week. But teams concealing injuries is not new. So I think that there's a good chance Hampton broke his ankle, not broke, but fractured it, had a fracture in his ankle, and that the team is covering it up. Maybe not covering it up, but just keeping it on the down low. And again, I've seen orthopedic surgeons who have said there's something more going on here. So I do think that Hampton could very well miss the next 3 or 4 weeks additionally. and not be a factor until late. And so really what it comes down to, since I'm okay with selling Chase Brown, is the Sutton versus Rome argument. And they're very close to my rest of season rankings. For me right now, I still prefer Rome. And maybe this is just me like being ridiculous and saying that I really, I'm too high on a player. Because I could be too high on Rome. That does not, it is not a crazy thought to think that like I'm way too high on Rome Odunze, but I am big on him. I do think he's a really good player. So I think that Rome is a guy that I like better than Sutton. And I'm okay with hosting Hampton on my bench or IR for the time being, because Chase Brown would essentially take up a bench spot because I would never feel comfortable to play him. On the other hand, you're giving up Tet and Chase Brown. That to me is the better value though, because again, Chase Brown is a guy I'm totally fine with getting rid of because to me he's a bench player. Like I will never feel comfortable having Chase Brown in my starting lineup. I think he's a bench player. And giving up Tet for Egbuka, who I think there's a clear difference of who's the better fantasy option, that's a move I would make. Like the Rome and the Rome for Rome and Hampton for Sutton and Chase Brown, that's a tighter one to me. Like where I could see myself mulling that over more. Like you just saw me mull it over more. Egbuka to me, getting him is a no-brainer. Like, I think that people undervaluing Egbuka, I'll take him. I'll take him right now. And I think that is an undervalue, and I think that makes your team better. So I would personally take Egbuka. Appreciate the super chat. Hinsey 347. Appreciate the super chat. Brashard Smith, Bashul Tune, or Isaiah Davis off the waivers. If there wasn't a couple different factors at play, it'd be a little tougher, but Brashard Smith is an easy one for me. I think with Bashul Tuden, his workload is still limited, and he's not a player that I realistically think is good enough to operate on the limitations of which he's being given. Like, if you gave me like Travis Etienne got traded to the Seahawks, and now it's LeQuint Allen and Bashul Tuden's backfield. Like, Bashul Tuden is obviously the guy that you would want, but Etienne's going to be there. So, like, Etienne is still a part of this team. He's going to be a part of the team, and he's, for the time being, the running back one, so it makes no sense right now to grab him off waivers. Isaiah Davis, the Jets are on a bye week. It also makes no sense to get him because Breece is the better player. And I will say, I think there's a possibility Breece gets traded. I do. But I will say, again, it doesn't make sense. Like, I guess it just kind of depends on what type of waiver acquisition you're trying to make. Because if you're trying to make an acquisition that's based off the future, I can understand going with Davis. But even then, I would still go with Brashard Smith. Because I said this a couple weeks ago. When I first, some of you may remember this video, when I first made the switch to start doing wide receiver videos and running back videos on Wednesday, it opened up my Thursday because usually kickers were on Thursday. And so one Thursday a couple weeks ago, I made a video about waiver wire guys that you need to get on before the breakout happens, and Brashard Smith was one of my favorite guys. So to me, now, that video is dated. Because I think that Brashard Smith is here. And I think that the opportunity is just being opened up. So Brashard Smith, to me, is the easy pickup. Appreciate the super chat. Speedy McNeasy, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Who do you think I should start? Zay or Bam Knight? I think they're both solid options. I think with Zay, I said this on the wide receiver rankings today. I think that there's no question, if you look at the history of Zay, that his ceiling is higher with Lamar. But I also said this, his floor is lower with Lamar. Because Lamar has a tendency to go towards the tight ends, right? So I think Mark Andrews is in better position. I think Isaiah Likely is in better position, far better position than they have been all year. But I also think that Zay is probably a little less of an unstable play because of the fact that they are tight end centric. And a lot of times they can get, wide receivers can get buried in this offense. So I worry about Zay's floor, but here's the thing. If you were asking me like Zay versus, DeAndre Swift, like I think Swift's floor is stable enough and his ceiling is just as high as Zay's, like 25 points, to where it makes sense for me to go with Swift. But with a guy like Bam, I mean, what is his ceiling, right? Even with no Michael Carter, which has kind of been the problem for Bam Knight over the last several weeks, like even with Michael Carter gone, I don't think that he has a high ceiling at all. I mean, I think that his ceiling is like 15 points, right? Like that's just not, and I think that his floor is probably around like 8 or 9 points. But who really cares if you're only getting 8 or 9 and Zay goes off for a 20-point game on your bench tomorrow? Like, I think that's in the cards. I mean, they're playing the Dolphins defense after all. Now, Bam is playing the Cowboys, which is a great matchup. But realistically, I just think the upside is clearly there with Zay this week as opposed to Bam. So I would personally go with Zay because I think that his floor is, I mean, it's lower, but it's not tremendously lower. I would say that Zay's floor is probably around 6 points in a full PPR format. But I realistically think he'll do better than that against the Dolphins defense. So I'll go Zay. Appreciate the super chat. Andrew Watchinson Fishing. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Half PPR 10 team. Running backs are Hall, Cook, Tracy, Charbonnet, Genty. And wide receivers are Devonta Smith, London, Rice, QJ. Trade Smith, Genty for Egbuka and J.K. Dobbins. Devonta Smith and Genty. So if you did that, your wide receivers would be London, Rice, and QJ. I'm comfortable with that. Running backs without Genty would be Hall, Cook, and Tracy, and Charbonnet. A little less comfortable with that, but still semi-comfortable. I think that getting Egbuka is awesome. Like, it's so interesting because I think that where we're at right now is, I feel like I've always, since the season started, I think I've been above consensus on how I think about Egbuka. And I was proven right for the majority of the first month. And then he gets injured. And now it's like, well, how do we value him? And I think that the questions are logical. But I think we're back in a place now where people are undervaluing him. Here's the thing. I think a lot of players go on into bye weeks. And this is the reason they have bye weeks in the NFL. It's a physical game. So you get a lot of these guys like Egbuka, who's playing through injury right now. And they come out of the bye week and they're different players. And they look like studs all over again. Think about what just happened to James Cook. I mean, James Cook looked the past couple of weeks before the bye week in Buffalo to be a descending asset in fantasy. Then he comes out of the bye week and goes freaking nuclear. And if you think about it, it's like, well, you could say to me, well, it's because they played the Panthers. Well, yeah, it was. And guess who's in the division with the Bucs? The Panthers. And guess who's also in the division with the Bucs? The Saints. And guess who's else in the division? The Falcons. Like, he's got several good games in his own division. So, like, Egbuka to me is still a buy low candidate. Like, it's bizarre, but, like, he's one of the last few, and I mean this when I say it, one of the last few buy low candidates because of how uncertain people are with Egbuka. And they have been all year. So I think Egbuka to me is still buy low. So for me, this is a no-brainer. Like, I like Devonta Smith, but I think I want to say something else about that too. I think a lot of people, and I said this myself weeks ago, I think that what I said was I think that the Eagles will trade AJ Brown. Now, I will admit this. One thing I was overlooking when I said that was, again, this is why it pays to watch the games like I do. And I watch games more than any other fantasy YouTuber. A lot of these guys don't watch the games, so they don't take away a lot that you can naturally just take away when you watch. And so, if you know the Eagles, and I guarantee you if there's Eagles fans in here, they'll vouch me. They'll back me up on this. Howie Roseman, the GM, very comfortable with dysfunction. And not even just him. Like the head coach over there, Sirianni, very comfortable with loud noise. I mean, think of the years that they won the Super Bowl. I mean, the Super Bowl year in 16 and 17, I mean, they had quarterbacks all over the place. They had loud players back then too. This past year, like AJ Brown was still griping and moaning last year. Like, they're comfortable with swimming in the chaos and still making water out of wine. So, like, I think that a lot of people are assuming that AJ Brown gets dealt, and I don't think it's a guarantee. So, like, unless AJ gets dealt, you're still going to deal with this situation with Devonta Smith on a weekly basis where it's like, do I play him or do I go ahead and play Tracy over him, for example? And then Genti, again, I like Genti, and I think in a lot of ways he's kind of not a buy low, but a trade candidate, a trade for target. But when you're getting Egbuka, man, it just kind of makes everything better. So I'd take Egbuka and J.K. Dobbins only because of Egbuka. Like, I think J.K. could easily become kind of a liability for your team, but I think it's worth it to have Egbuka. Appreciate the super chat. H13 Productions, appreciate both of your super chats. Which trade is better? Send Rashee Rice, Kyron, Flowers, get Bijan, Egbuka, and Johnston. Or 2, send Garrett Wilson, Kyron, and Flowers, get Jacobs, Egbuka, and Fannin. And Fab. And then you said, for clarification, it's a 10-point PPR, 2 flex quarterback. Quarterbacks are Baker and Stafford. Running backs are Kyron, Judkins, Chase Brown, Dowdle, Woody, Benson, Davis. Wide receivers are Rice, Garrett Wilson, MHJ, Flowers, Addison, and tight end is Kelsey. Okay, so sending Rashee Rice is a very, very... I don't like it. I don't like sending over Rashee Rice. Even though you get Bijan, it is good. You are getting, in my opinion, 2 superstar-ish players. I would consider Egbuka to be a superstar when he's fully healthy. But, I mean, I do have some, again, when you're making this high of a caliber of a trade, like the last trade I went through, giving up Devonta Smith and Ashton Genti for Egbuka, that doesn't feel like a stretch. But, like, when we're giving up Rashee Rice, and even Kyron, who I like, you know, I think Kyron's a really good player too. I'm definitely I'm going to scrutinize a trade for Egbuka harder. Now, Bijan obviously is a great piece in this trade as well. You're getting a clear running back upgrade, but you definitely will get, even when Egbuka comes back, and even if he's fully healthy, it's a downgrade. It is. It is a downgrade from Rashee Rice. The question is, how big is the upgrade from Bijan to from Kyron to Bijan? And I would say that it's clearly an upgrade, probably a 6-point upgrade compared to like a 4 or 5-point downgrade from Rice to Egbuka. But I do think that the problem I have with Bijan is that Bijan is on this team that I've been talking trash about for a while now, and being probably the most inconsistent team in the NFL, and a team that I just worry about. Like, I really do worry about this team. And that's not to say that Bijan can't be great. I mean, if you look at Bijan, like, his only bad game was this past week. I mean, even, like, think about, what was the week? Was it week 4? Week 3? Week 3. Think about the game that they lost and got routed for 0 points in the Panthers game. Bijan still had 16 points in a full PPR format, right? Like that's pretty incredible. And then this past week was his bad week. Yeah, I obviously love getting Bijan. The ceiling on the guy is tremendous, and the floor is really good too. Let's look at your other trade, because I'm mulling this first one. I think that there's good to this, and I think that there's bad to it. I don't like sending Rashee Rice. The second trade is send Garrett Wilson, Kyron, and Flowers for Jacobs, Egbuka, and Fannin. To me, this is just a better trade. Like, I get it. I love the idea of getting Bijan, but the reality is, like, Egbuka is still, again, someone I think can be a superstar. And Jake, if you're... Think about what I was just talking about, right? Splitting hairs with Kyron and... Or, I'm sorry, splitting hairs with, like, Rashee Rice and Bijan Robinson, essentially, is, like... It's a totally different story than splitting hairs with Jacobs and Garrett Wilson. Because that's essentially what's happening here. Is, like, instead of Rashee Rice, we're going to swap him out for Garrett Wilson. And it's the same deal, aside from that, except that you're not getting a flexible option necessarily, but you're going to get Fannin, who could come in as a tight end. But the real good thing is that you're getting a running back one, Josh Jacobs, and he may not be your running back one, but he's a running back one in fantasy, and you're also going to get Egbuka, who could be one of the best wide receiver twos. So, like, just think about your team like this, right? So if you get rid of Kyron and you get Josh Jacobs, your running backs will be Jacobs, Judkins, Chase Brown, Dowdle, Woody, and Benson, and Davis. That's a really good running back room. I mean, I feel really good about that with Dowdle as your running back 3 currently. And then your wide receiver room without Garrett Wilson and Egbuka coming in, Rice, Egbuka, Marvin, and Addison. Like, I feel a lot better about that trade. Get Egbuka and Jacobs and Fannin. That's the trade number 2 is the better trade to me. I had to mull over the first trade because I do see the value in it. And obviously, like I said, getting Bijan feels great. But giving up a player like Rashee Rice is really tough to swallow. Especially when your running back room will still have that, not hole, because like Judkins, when he's on, is a great running back too. But I just feel like your team is better balanced with the second trade. And I think that you're giving up less. So yeah, I think that trade 2 is my favorite one. Appreciate the super chat, man. Always good to see you in here as well. Alias, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Golden versus Worthy, leaning Worthy. Yeah, I would lean Worthy too. I think that, if you're Alias, I don't know, are you a member at fsroundup.com? If you're not, you should be. Yeah, I think you seem like someone who definitely would benefit from the site and just having access to my rankings on a weekly basis. I will say this, like, with Christian Watson back, Matthew Golden took a big hit in my rankings. A big hit. And I'll just kind of give you kind of a sneak peek to what is with the membership by using the comparison feature. So I kind of highlighted this on Sunday Live. So what this does, we'll just type in Matthew Golden versus Xavier Worthy. So what this comparison feature does is it basically takes into account several different factors, including my rankings. And you'll see like how different Matthew Golden is ranked versus Worthy. Worthy to me is my 64th ranked player and my 90th. And Matthew Golden is my 90th ranked player. So just from that standpoint, it's just a better play. But then you can also look at this. Why is Worthy the better option? Higher fantasy points per game, highest usage volume, best fantasy points per snap efficiency. I mean, those are like metrics that matter and go into people's decisions. Now, again, with the premium subscription, you can have access to the comparison feature with any players that you want. I think that the reason that Worthy has been a problem for me is because I don't like what I've seen from him because I think he's injured. I really do. I think that he's been injured, and I don't think he's been healthy the full year. And so I think that in this matchup versus Buffalo, where I think points could be all over the place, it just feels like a better matchup. And it also feels like just a better option to go with Worthy over a guy who has not already been consistent enough with the work he's been getting. And it got worse against the Pittsburgh Steelers. A great matchup. So for me, it's definitely Worthy. Appreciate the super chat, man. Always good to see you in here. 813 Productions, appreciate the super chat. I agree. I feel like Rasheed and Egbuka would go crazy. I do too. If I go for the Jacobs trade, should I try to hold Flowers and send Addison or MHJ instead? Absolutely, yeah. I would try to hold Flowers. That's the only drawback that I was having with that, and I probably should have said it the first time that I was evaluating this, was that my only drawback with those trades you were showing me was that Flowers, I do think, is clearly the better option between those other two wide receivers. And I think probably the reason I didn't say it was because I was kind of assuming that maybe you already tried with those other two guys and that Zay was the only guy that he wanted. Zay to me is a clear hold. I should have called Zay a trade target for the past couple of weeks because I think he has been. And I do think that with Lamar coming back, he has a better ceiling than all those other guys. Like with Addison, I realistically think he's like a really good one to throw into this one because I love Addison, the player. I've called him one of the better wide receiver twos in NFL over the last several weeks. But I will also say this. If you think, and I think it's very popular to take a dump on Carson Wentz right now, but if you think J.J. McCarthy is drastically better, you have a short memory. And I'm not saying you do. I'm talking to anybody who thinks J.J. is automatically the better option. He's not. J.J. McCarthy was freaking bad. So I do think that affects Jordan Addison because anytime, and this is kind of one of the reasons why I ranked Olave lower in my rankings is because he's going to be dealing with a new quarterback this week as well. Anytime, bottom line, that you're getting a new quarterback, well, the wide receiver position is completely screwed up because the backup quarterback may prefer to throw to somebody else, right? Like Carson Wentz and Jordan Addison actually had strong chemistry. So I do think that without Wentz, Addison is very unstable. And I'm fine with doing MHJ too. I don't like MHJ. I would definitely try to hold Flowers if you could. And I would be willing to send either of those guys. Whoever you preferred, I would get him off my team. Appreciate the super chat. All right, let's go through some free questions and try to get through as many as I can. So I'll probably try to speed it up here a little bit. Jeremy Torres, what's going on? Kenneth Walker or Merritt? I'll go with Kenneth because I see a better player. I mean, and he's in a better situation on a better offense behind a better offensive line. And I think that the matchup is better because Washington's defense can't hold a candle to the Seahawks defense. So, yeah, for me, it's Kenneth Walker. Fire Channel TV, appreciate the super chat. What's going on? Start one, Chase Brown, Travis Hunter, Bam Knight. So I'll go ahead and sit Chase Brown because I'd play Bam and Hunter over him. Again, I think that Chase Brown probably peaked. And especially if Flacco does not play. And I saw a report earlier, like a couple hours ago, that Flacco is in real danger of missing this game. My only question is, was it his shoulder, his throwing shoulder? Let's see if I can get that. Yeah, it is his throwing shoulder. That's a big problem. They're saying he's 50-50 to face the Bears. Man, that's bad. What bad luck. Well, realistically, that's just bad offensive line play coming to a head. And an old quarterback. Yeah, I think Chase Brown peaked. I don't think the matchup this week is the problem that I'm having. The Bears are beatable, but I just think he peaked. Travis Hunter versus Bam Knight is the real question. And I think that, again, it comes down to ceiling. Because when I think of Bam Knight, I think of a player who ultimately doesn't have that high of a floor. And I think the only problem with Hunter is that his floor has been really low too. But if you look at the last several weeks with Hunter, his floor has gotten better because he's getting targeted down the field a lot more. So like with Hunter, obviously he had the week 7 explosion. And I will caution people this. Don't forget, Travis Hunter's big game was in a blowout. It's hard to take stuff away from a blowout either way. If you're getting blown out or if you're the team that did the blowing out. And I know how stupid that sounds. But in other matchups, man, I mean, Travis Hunter versus the Chiefs in week 5, he had 3 targets and 3 catches for 64 yards. That's not a bad floor. So my point being is that he's been getting used more in the passing game, and it's increased his floor. And he clearly has the higher ceiling. So in this matchup versus the Raiders, I'll go with the guy who's ascending versus the guy who I think is just in a situation that makes sense for fantasy, but is not a great situation. Like, Bam Knight makes sense to play him, but it's not one of those plays that I'm dying to make, right? So I do think that Travis Hunter, better upside, and the floor is realistically not that much different. Appreciate the super chat. All right, let's answer some more questions. Would you drop Ricky Pearsall for Travis Hunter? If that's the worst option, then yes. I have seen Ricky Pearsall on some waiver wires, and I've tried to pick him up where I could get him. Granted, I'm in usually my redraft leagues that I've seen him on. They're 12-man leagues with like 8 bench spots, so they're a little deeper, so I can afford to have him. If you're just in a position to where you're in like a 10 or 8-man league with a shallower bench, it's okay to drop Ricky, but I'd probably try to find someone else before I drop Ricky. Alias, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Still have the same feeling about Higgins. Didn't watch that game, but he got me decent points. Think the Steelers will trade for someone that can actually catch a ball like Jacoby Myers? I'll answer the second part first because that's so funny to me. I was talking to my dad tonight when I was celebrating 25,000 subscribers, and I was with my parents and my wife, and we were just drinking some margaritas, and I was like, the Steelers are trying to trade for a wide receiver, and I was telling them, they're going to trade for someone, because this is what the Steelers do. They love to get guys who are old and outdated and past their prime. And I'm not saying Jacoby Myers is necessarily, but I think he's close. I mean, I do think Myers, like, part of the problem with him is that he doesn't want to play for them. So I do think that it's like a catch-22, because it's like he could end up being good for you, but then realistically, what is his ceiling? But I do think that if he's the same player that he has been, good wide receiver too. I think that the Steelers will trade for a receiver. I'm not sure if it's going to be Jacoby Myers because they like a good value. And one thing that has shocked me about the Steelers this year is this just shows you how tone deaf and how outdated their thinking is. And their developmental staff is one of the worst in the leagues because they genuinely believe that they're one player away. And it couldn't be farther from the frigging truth. I mean, they are so... I'm gonna make a decision here. I'm gonna curse for the second time on this channel. and I'm going to try to never do it again. They're fucking morons. Morons. Like, for them to think that they're only a player away is like me saying I'm 10 pounds away from having a six-pack abs. It's so funny. Like, it's so crazy to me. But yeah, I mean, I do think that they will. I think that they will try to trade for a wide receiver. So it just depends. Like, I think Myers, I've seen his name a bunch. I've seen Brian Thomas Jr.'s name floated, but they're not going to trade Brian Thomas Jr., and the Steelers wouldn't be the ones to get him. But yeah, I mean, I do think that the Steelers will try to trade for a receiver, and in all likelihood, it would be, I mean, of the receivers on the market, right? Like, and you never know who exactly is all available, but if it's between like the obvious names like Jacoby Myers, A.J. Brown, those types of guys, then they would definitely trade for Jacoby Myers. So, no, I think it's funny because, I mean, I'm just a cynical Steelers fan. That's what I am. And then the first part of the question was, do I still have the same feeling about Higgins? And you clarified Jaden Higgins. Didn't watch the game, but he got me decent points. So, obviously you're asking me, like, do I still not like him, right? Because I've been big on, like, I think going back to the offseason, I've always thought that Jalen Noel is the better player. I do. So I do think that Jalen Noel still is the better player, personally. And I do think that moving forward, he's probably the guy who's going to be a more consistent threat. However, I will add this to my analysis, which is clearly if things can click between him and Stroud and he can create some separation, he will be a factor and has a higher ceiling than Jalen Noel. But the problem is that even in his best games this year, like this past week, for example, week 8, he had 13.4 fantasy points, caught 4 of his 7 targets for 34 yards and a touchdown. Now let's look at a couple weeks ago. And I think it was in week 5. No, it was week 4? Yeah, week 4. He caught a touchdown pass on 1 target. Like, what have we realistically seen from Jaden Higgins that makes us feel like he's on the precipice of breaking out? And the answer is really nothing. Like, he has done really nothing to really make us feel like he's right there. You know, he's right there, ready to break out. It's just not the case. So I don't feel that much different about him. I feel a little different in the sense that, like, yes, it's possible that he ends up, like, developing into their wide receiver 2 in Houston. But as far as fantasy goes, I don't think that he'll be much more than a flexible option. So maybe in the future he could become like a guy I would suggest to pick up off waivers, but I'm still not there right now. So it's not that much different, to be honest with you. Because I watched that game live. Like, I watched that game live, and I again, like, the physical attributes are there, but the guy rarely separates. And that's a big thing for me. I like receivers who could separate because that breeds target hogs. Breeds them. And Jalen Noel is more of a target guy. So I still prefer Jalen Noel. Appreciate the super chat, man. Always good to talk to you, Alias. Michael, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Traded Adams, Olave, and Diggs for Lamb, Moore, and Aaron Jones. New team is CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Moore, Jones, Bill, Brees, Bijan, Jake Ferguson, Ayuk, Evans, Godwin, and Kyler. So you traded Devontae Adams, Olave, and Stephon Diggs for CeeDee Lamb, DJ Moore, and Aaron Jones. That's a huge win. I mean, again, anytime you're making a trade, we need to make sure that we're making trades that obviously are going to benefit our team. And not every trade that we make is a clear winner, right? Like, there's going to be some trades, like, for example, I've been using this trade as an example for a lot of the season because I can say it because I did it. Like, it's a personal experience of mine that I did this year when I traded away Marvin Harrison Jr. and Darren Waller for Ladd McConkey. Like, at the time that I made that trade, there was no clear winner, right? Like, you could argue on both sides of that who won that trade. Well, several weeks later, it looks like I'm the winner of that trade because Darren Waller is now on the IR, and he's also the other guy got a wide receiver that is like dysfunctional most of the time. And Ladd McConkey is also coming through. So realistically, there's not always a clear winner. This one, there's a clear winner. I mean, what did you give up, right? Devontae Adams, yes, I really like him. And Olave's done very well. And Diggs obviously has done very well in certain weeks. But you're getting a superstar, CeeDee Lamb. And I do think that he is still a superstar. Obviously, it's been a little bit different this year because they actually have like a real wide receiver too with George Pickens. And so Pickens is kind of eating into CeeDee's ceiling a little bit, but I still think the ceiling is there. And the floor is clearly there too. So to me, it just makes your team better. So your new wide receiver room is CeeDee and A.J. Brown, which is a great 1-2 combo. DJ Moore, Aaron Jones. You've got Ayuk, Evans, Kit, Godwin, and Kyler. Yeah, I do think that this is an overall good move for your team because, again, I'll take a superstar over depth most times. Like, unless the depth is good depth. Like, because to me, particularly with Diggs, he's never a guy that I'm going to feel like, oh, I got to play him this week. Now, Olave was a guy that, like, that's a real depth loss. That's a real loss for your team. And obviously, you're upgrading from Adams to Lamb. But Olave was the true loss here. That was the true loss to your team. Diggs, to me, again, is just a player like DJ Moore. I'd feel just as comfortable flexing him on a weekly basis as I do with DJ Moore. Or, I'm sorry, as I do with Diggs. So, yeah, I think it's an overall W for your team. Appreciate the super chat. Our Dimp Star, what's going on? Hey, man. Appreciate the super chat. Good to see you in here tonight. I was 6-0, lost my last 2 games. Confused. Nico and Sutton scared me. Don't blame you. I got Waddle, Higgins, Dobbs, Odunze. I don't know. I'm thinking about going double tight end. Warren and Kraft in the flex. Listen, I actually, in certain circumstances, I have no problem with flexing 2 tight ends. A lot of the times it comes down to the fact that if you're in a deep enough league or if you have 2 really good tight ends, it can make a lot of sense to do that. Like, in your situation here, you're asking me about a couple different guys that I think all have really high ceilings, though, right? Like Waddle this week, I've been saying I nailed it last week, right? Like with Waddle, I talked about him last week as a really good must-start option. And I said this. The Miami Dolphins are like this. This is very trackable history. Like very trackable. And this stuff matters because it is very relevant for fantasy. The Dolphins are a really good, like, performing offense. Not a good team, good offense in clean weather. So, like, anytime they're in Miami when the weather is in their favor, or anytime they're in a dome, I trust that offense to get points. But if you take them into Cleveland, where that game a couple weeks ago was rainy, it was cold, it was wet, it was windy, they're going to play bad. And that's very trackable once again. Like, you can look back to the years that they've had Mike McDaniel as the head coach. They're not a weathered football team. This week, it's in Miami tomorrow night, and it's against a bad defense. I think Waddle's a must-play. And I would also venture to say the same about Odunze. And now, I will say this, like, I think that Odunze is a really good play too, but obviously benching Tucker Kraft is kind of crazy right now because of the way the guy's been producing. However, the one thing I will say about Kraft is that this week he's playing a team that realistically, in all likelihood, won't be able to keep it as close as the Steelers did. And by the way, this game was not close. Like, this game was, I mean, it was close in the first half, right? Like, the first half, the Steelers actually had a lead that they were able to sustain. But the second half, they ripped the Steelers to shreds, and by the fourth quarter, that was not a close game. Carolina, probably not going to be the same situation. So if you look back to other weeks with Tucker Kraft, they've had some weeks where he has not been as consistent. Week 7 was a good target week. Week 6, though, he had 2 targets. Week 4, before the bye week, he had 5 targets. Week 3, he had 4. Week 2, he had 6. Like, he's consistently involved enough and has a high ceiling because of the offense, but I'm worried a little bit about the matchup because I do think that, especially with Christian Watson back in the fold, it just complicates things a little bit more. So I don't want to discourage you from going 2 tight ends because I think with those 2 tight ends, you can't go wrong having them both in the lineup. And again, it goes back to my cardinal rule with like flexing tight ends. Because I'll give you an example. In my deepest dynasty league, where we have I think we have 15 bench spots. I've never counted, but we've got to have 15 probably. And it's a super flex 3 wide receiver league. It's super crazy. I am actually playing 3 tight ends. I have Tyler Warren in one of my tight end slot always, and I've got Ertz and Henry that go in a lot of situations. So I'm not opposed to flexing 2 tight ends in certain situations when you have deep leagues and if you have 2 elite tight ends, and you do. But I will say this, I think that those wide receiver matchups, particularly Waddle and particularly Adunze, they're going to find their way in my lineup. That's just the way I feel. That's the way I fundamentally play fantasy, is when I get 2 higher upside wide receivers like that, they're just not going on the bench. So I get where you're coming from. I know it's scary to lose 2 games, but I think I'd go ahead and play those wide receivers. Appreciate the super chat. Brian, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Need a flex. Jennings, Shaheed, Golden, AJ Barnes. Barner, yeah. AJ Barner's not a bad play. I mean, AJ Barner has been a really good tight end for the most of the season. Again, I think the only problem I have with Barner is that he's actually kind of been similar. He's been like a poor man's Tucker Kraft. Good offense. The quarterback likes him, but I will say this. Problem with him is that Elijah Arroyo is definitely a factor. He definitely is a threat to AJ Barner on a weekly basis, and he became even more so in Week 7 versus the Texans. But realistically, that threat is always there. So I'm not the biggest Jennings guy. I could see myself playing Jennings or Barner over Jennings, but not over Shaheed. Shaheed to me is the piece that makes a lot of sense because, again, it is concerning that they have a new quarterback. But I will say that a lot of times what happens when a new quarterback comes to town is if there's a change, it benefits the wide receiver too. And Shaheed, he's been the wide receiver too, but he's actually gotten plenty of targets. He has not been he has not been shafted in the target department. He has not been. So I do think that Shaheed realistically is a solid play this week and one that I put in my top 30 for a reason. I do think that Shaheed is a solid play. So for me, it's going to be Shaheed. And because I'd play Barner over Golden, but I probably would not play Barner over Jennings. I'd probably stick with Jennings, but I would go with Shaheed over all those guys. Appreciate the super chat. Michael, appreciate the super chat. I also have Jonathan Taylor. Let's go back up to your question. Brees, Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, I mean, you're in good position. Like I said, I think that it benefits your team overall. Having CeeDee Lamb as your wide receiver 1 now, when realistically, the only problem that I have is that losing Olave, a little bit of a bummer. Because now your flex basically goes from Olave to DJ Moore, Aaron Jones, Breece Hall. and maybe Godwin when he comes back. Like those are your flex options on a weekly basis. Like you're definitely feeling better about your team when Olave's in the lineup. But I will say again, I've been talking about this New Orleans quarterback situation. There's no guarantee that Olave continues to be good. There's just not. I mean, Tyler Shough is not a good quarterback. And anytime a new quarterback comes in, things can get weird with the wide receivers in the pecking order. So I think it's still a benefit to your team. Appreciate the super chat. Too Mean Fuzz. Good to see you in here. Appreciate the super chat. Bam and Worthy for Debo. I think that I have real concerns about Debo right now. And Debo, but you kind of have to face facts here. Debo has been not as good these past several weeks. Ever since he was ever since he started dealing with this heel injury, he has not been the same player. And it's been proven. Now, there is definitely the ultimate problem, I think, is that when Jaden Daniels misses, that's really the big issue because his upside completely dissipates. But even with Jaden, man, like Jaden, when he played against the Cowboys, well, Debo didn't play that game. But Jaden played against the Bears, and Debo didn't do anything, right? Like, he did nothing because, again, dealing with injury. The Chargers game, it was a good one, but that's kind of around when his injury started to get worse. So I do worry about that, man. Like, I think that Debo is still a guy that I choose to believe in because I loved the value in drafts. I loved it. And so I've got Debo on basically all my redraft teams this year. So, like, I'm big on Debo. And I don't think that giving up Bam and Worthy is a bad move because Bam is a ticking time bomb and a low end ticking. Like, he's kind of like he's like a ticking piñata. Like, when he explodes, it's just going to be like candy because Trey Benson comes back. Like, it's not going to leave a lasting impact on your team when Bam Knight like goes out and becomes the RB2. And Worthy, on the other hand, I've been saying it for all year. I don't think he's healthy. Like, I think that his health has been a real issue this year, and I don't think it's getting better. And obviously, his fantasy situation is not good with Rashee Rice back. So I would take the Debo side for sure. Because I ultimately just think that Debo is a player that, if he hits and if he eventually gets healthy, could be still a league-winning type of player. Appreciate the super chat. T-Mans, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Dynasty 1 quarterback, half PPR. Compete year will finish 3rd or 4th. Send Worthy, Walker, late 26 first. Get Nico and Breece Hall. Worth it? I like Nico's playoff schedule. This one hits home for me because I actually, up until this year, I had Nico and Breece on the same dynasty team. I had both of them on the same team last year, and I gave away Breece Hall this past offseason because it was time to move on. And it made sense for my team. I got Puka Nacua out of the deal. I don't remember the exact deal, but it was like the pieces involved. I gave up Breece, Jaden Reed, Braylon Allen, and like a future third for Puka, future second, and some fab. Something like that. So, yeah, this one hits home for me. You know, I think that both players in Dynasty are really good. Nico is still young. I think he's like 26, if I'm remembering correctly. Let's look it up. Nico Collins. Nico Collins is 26. He'll be 27 in March. So, yeah, I still think Nico's really good. And Breece Hall is a young guy. I think, is he 24 yet? 24, yeah. So he'll be 25 at the start of next year. Hopefully by that time he'll be on a new team. You can only pray to God that happens. I think that they're both good dynasty assets. Like I said, I reluctantly give up Brees in my own dynasty league because it made my team better. But I like Brees. And I do think that he'll still be young enough by the time he gets on another team where it makes sense to take him in dynasty. And like you said, it's a compete type of year. So Worthy to me is, I think the only problem I have with trading Worthy is that, Rashee Rice is still a player I kind of don't know how to feel about long term. Like, he's clearly great, and he's clearly the best wide receiver they have in Kansas City. But Kansas City has been down this road before. I mean, Tyreek Hill was a huge red flag personality-wise, and I think Rashee Rice is a huge red flag. So for Dynasty, yes, it's great to have Rice, but that's a guy I'm not sure if he gets a second contract in Kansas City. Maybe he does. Maybe they sign tomorrow, and I look like a big idiot for even debating this. But I don't think Worthy is an automatic send-off just because of his performance this year. Walker, I have no problem giving him up. And a late 26 first, again, depends how late. But I like the trade. I do overall like the trade. It's just when it comes to Dynasty, I like to break it down even more than I like to break down redraft trades. Because Dynasty, there's just more layers to it, right? Dynasty, you're obviously competing for this year, but you don't want to sell the farm and just go all in for 1 year, right? You want to ideally build a team that could compete now and in the future. And I think that you're set up in a way that this trade does make sense to do this trade because you're not giving up serious options for this year. And I don't think you're giving up serious options for next year and in the future because I think that Brees and Nico are both players that still have plenty of dynasty juice left in them. So I do think that it's a good move ultimately. Yeah, I think I would do the same thing. Appreciate the super chat. Cash Money 9709. Appreciate the super chat. What's going on with you tonight? Flex Diggs, T. Hunter. For tight end Theo, Juwan Johnson, or AJ Brown. Diggs, T, and Hunter. This to me is a pretty easy Hunter. Right now, I mean, I'll operate just for argument's sake. I'll operate under the assumption that Flacco plays, and I do T. Higgins was not far outside my top 30 under that assumption. Those of you who have a membership at FS Roundup can see exactly where he's ranked. And again, if you don't have a membership at FS Roundup and you want access to my top 250 rankings weekly, you need to get that membership. It's only $6 a month, and you get league-winning features. Not just the rankings, but the automatic waiver wire tool, comparison features, league sync-ups. So, yeah, I think that T. Higgins, if Flacco plays, is a fine play. Diggs, to me, is the least appealing out of all of them. So I would sit Diggs for T if Flacco plays. But if Flacco doesn't play, T is not startable. Not startable. If they have to go with Browning again, I'm not playing T. So it comes down to, I'll say, realistically, if we operate under the assumption that Flacco plays, it's between T and Hunter. And for me, it's a pretty clear Travis Hunter because, again, even last week, right? Cincinnati, they put up a lot of points on the Jets. I mean, they put up 38 points. He had 2 targets. This goes back to something I said when this whole debacle. When Joe Flacco originally went out and he left the lineup, I remember vividly saying this, backup quarterbacks and wide receiver twos, they don't work very well usually. Unless there's a connection between those two guys, it's not going to work. But the reality of what I was trying to get across, realistically more than anything, was that it doesn't work with two wide receivers, right? Burrow is so good that he can do it with two wide receivers with his eyes closed, right? So like he can make it work in fantasy for both those guys. Well, I mean, outside of 1 week, which was against the Steelers' poorest defense, it didn't work for both of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So I think that T, either way, is a risky play. And again, that's why I would easily go with Hunter, because their floors are both pretty low, but I think Hunter's ceiling is a lot higher. So, and if it's without Burrow, it's pretty easily going to be Hunter, because I already prefer Hunter a lot more than I prefer Diggs this week. So for me, it's Hunter. And then for tight end, Theo, Juwan Johnson, or AJ Barner. Tight end rankings, I will say, not up to date on the site yet. Obviously, many of you know that tight end and quarterback rankings will be out tomorrow on the site and on YouTube. Right now, the way I'm leaning is that, Theo Johnson is so, it's such a risky play. And I get it, there is upside, especially now that Cam Scadaboo's down. They're going to throw the ball quite a bit. Theo Johnson, though, like, if you take away that lucky touchdown he got against the Broncos, he's mostly been pretty bad with Jackson Dart. Like, outside of that 2-touchdown performance where he was in the red zone, pretty unstartable. Juwan Johnson, also scary with the new tight end, and AJ Barner is just one of those guys that's like, to me, the better option, because I think that his ceiling is probably higher than both of theirs and has the best, not the best. I mean, I like Jackson Dart, but Darnold is playing really good football right now. And I don't think that any of their floors are particularly different. So I'll go with the guy with the highest ceiling, who I think is AJ Barner. So I'll go Barner, and I will go with Travis Hunter. Appreciate the super chat. Angel Coronado. Appreciate the super chat. Good to see you in here too. In the comments, thanks for all you do. Well, thank you for being here. Henry for love and a super flex. On its face, it's a smash accept. But that team is in first and is stacked. He also only has one quarterback. I feel like I will only be making it harder to win if I accept. Thoughts? Yeah, I think there's two parts of me that go into like trades, right? Like, and I'll admit, the majority of the time that I make trades, I'm not really thinking about the other team's situation, unless it's from a negotiation standpoint, right? And I'm about to get kind of like technical with trades here, so bear with me here for a second. Because I'm just trying to explain to you guys like what goes in my mind with trades. So like for me, what I consider with the other person's team when I make a fantasy trade is what makes sense for them, right? Like what would make sense in order for me to get the player that I ultimately want from them for them to be able to give up. And that's pretty much the extent of how I mostly think about the other team's situation when I make a trade. Like, after the deal goes through, I don't think twice about their situation. Because most of the time I make trades, I feel like I'm winning, right? So, to your point, like, Henry for love and a super flex on its face seems like a really good situation. But maybe I'm misreading this. So, Henry for love, he only has one quarterback. So I'm curious, are you giving away Jordan Love or are you receiving Jordan Love? Because if you're taking Jordan Love, then that only weakens his team if he has one quarterback. But I'm assuming you're saying you're giving Jordan Love for Derrick Henry. That's what I'm assuming you're saying, because that would give him two quarterbacks, right? So if you could confirm that, that'd be great. Because that would make sense what you're saying. I do think that Fire Channel TV on YouTube says giving away. So that's kind of my understanding too. Okay, you're giving away love. Yeah, so that's my understanding is that you're giving away love. I do think that giving away Jordan Love to a first place team that is already stacked and has one quarterback is probably an ill-advised move. And that's kind of the other portion of this that I was going to say is that I rarely think, I would say 80% of the time that I make trades, I rarely think about how it benefits them more than it benefits me. Now, there are circumstances that I do that. And the reason majority of the time I don't think about that is because I find it very rare that I'm trading with a first place team. I usually don't like to do business like that. Oftentimes I'm in first place, to be honest with you. But unless I'm in first place, I don't like to trade with the first place team because a lot of times it's hard to weaken their team. And they're not going to accept trades that weaken their team. So this one to me, I think that, again, like you said, on the surface, it's awesome, right? I've been telling people to buy Derrick Henry for a long time now. But the problem is now that Henry is not cheap, right? So Henry at this point, not my favorite trade target because you can't get him on a buy low like you could a couple weeks ago. So giving Jordan Love to a team that has one quarterback, obviously he's fishing for a quarterback. So I personally would not make that trade either. I think I would go ahead and decline that trade. When you're when you're trading with a first place team, you do have to think about their team and how that impacts their team a lot. And I do think that by giving them an additional quarterback, it's only going to hurt your case and make theirs stronger. Appreciate the super chat. Okay, we'll answer a couple more questions, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit the hay for the night. So I'm going to go through a couple questions I'm seeing. Spears or Downs, Jeremy Torres asks. I will say Tyjae Spears. I think that he's honestly the better running back in Tennessee at this point. DK or Olave. I would personally go with DK. I think the matchup upside is just higher, and I trust his quarterback more than I trust Olave's now. Tracy or Knight? I would personally go with Tyrone Tracy. It's very close, though. Pick one receiver, Addison, Keenan, or Diggs. I'd go with Keenan. Devontae Adams or Ashton Genty in the flex. I would personally go with Devontae. That's close. That is really close. Those guys, let's go through the comparison feature again. I just want to show people this. What you can do with a premium subscription at FS Roundup is use the comparison feature. So let's look up Ashton Genty and Devontae Adams. Compare these guys. So Devontae Adams is 2 spots ahead in my rankings, and that's kind of the way I was leaning. Because I knew that these guys were really closely ranked, but I did end up ranking Adams over Genty. And so the comparison feature takes a lot of my rankings into account. Also, it says that Devontae Adams' highest fantasy points per game, obviously, most efficient with touches and targets. So there's a couple reasons why the comparison feature would back me up on this one and go with Devontae Adams over Ashton Genty. Denver or Green Bay's defense? I'm going to go with the Denver Broncos. I just think that they're just a better defense overall, and I think they're more trustworthy to give you fantasy upside. Mahomes or Lamar this week? I would personally play Mahomes in this matchup. Lamar in his first week back. Kind of curious to see how much he moves around tomorrow night. Obviously, with him coming back, I would assume that he's going to be pretty much good to go. He's so mobile at that it's hard to picture Lamar playing when he's not 100% because he's so mobile. So, but I'll go ahead and play Mahomes because he's been so dominant. Uh, Drake May or Daniel Jones. I will personally go with Drake May. I just think that he's been too good to sit. McBride or Kelsey this week, I'd go with McBride. Chase Brown or Tracy, I'd go with Tracy. Bowers or Ferguson, I would go with Bowers in this first game back. Jaden Daniels or Sam Darnold, I would go with Jaden if he plays, personally. Let's see if we can get an update. Did he practice today? Let's see. Jaden Daniels. Washington Post says he's in line to return Sunday, but who trusts the Washington Post? Jaden Daniels. Let's see if we can get a practice report. It says they expect him to, but, I mean, can I get a practice report on the guy? Let's just, I guess, since nobody wants to give it a practice report on the guy, let's just operate on the assumption that he does, I guess. Yeah, I'd go with Jaden Daniels. All right, we'll go ahead and end the night there. I appreciate y'all being in here tonight. Like the video, subscribe to the channel on your way out. And again, guys, tried to answer as many as I could tonight. But if you did not get your question answered, go to fsroundup.com, our site right now, and go create a start-sit poll. Get live feedback and results from the community, and go vote on other polls. Entirely free to vote, entirely free to make your own poll. But if you really want to support me and support the channel, I would appreciate it if you would sign up for the premium subscription where you can get the automatic waiver wire tool, which is a legitimate league-winning tool this year. Access to the comparison feature I was showing you, access to league sync-ups, and my full top 250 rankings on a weekly basis for $6 a month. So again, great way to support me, great way to support the channel and what we're doing. But either way, love you guys, and I appreciate y'all being in here, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Peace out, guys.